Welcome to the sun today for the 18th of January 2022. When I started this video, I thought the sun was getting quieter, and as you will see by the end of this video, I've changed my mind. Today I'm going to start using the sunspot classification when talking about the sunspots, and it's a little complicated, so I'm going to leave this description of the various categories up for several days so you can refer to it. An alpha sunspot region is a unipolar sunspot region, i.e. it only has one polarity, either positive or negative. A beta region is a bipolar region with separation between both polarities. Gamma is a complex sunspot region with mixed polarities. A beta gamma is a bipolar region, i.e. it has both polarities, but has a very, very complicated neutral line between the two polarities. Often you could draw several different neutral lines. This is usually a sign of the possibility of having a flaring region. A delta region is when there are two umbrae, i.e. dark areas, in the same penumbra, that's that grey area around it, but they're of opposite polarities and not very far separated. This again is an invitation for large flares. A beta delta region is a beta sunspot region, but with containing one or more delta spots. A beta gamma delta region, again a very positive thing for flares, is a beta gamma sunspot region containing one or more delta spots. A gamma delta region is a gamma sunspot group but containing one or more delta spots. So let's take a look at the sunspot regions individually. We have active region 2927 down here in the southwest quadrant. It's a single alpha spot and it seems to have been decaying over the last few days. Next we'll take a look at active region 2929, which is also by the west limb but in the northern hemisphere, and this is what is called a beta gamma region. You can see the two large spots, they will be of opposite polarity, and there are a few satellite spots around it as well. I counted 19 spots in this group. Next we have region 2930 up in the northwest. It is a beta region. It has two separate polarity spots, the large spots, you can see them there. I can count 16 small spots in this region, going to be setting over the west limb fairly shortly. Not last but certainly least, we have a very faint area 2932, which seems to be falling apart. It just has a few tiny spots in it. I count 6 spots, so this is an alpha region. Lastly, we have a beta region down here, which is 2933 in the southern hemisphere, one large leading spot and some small trailing satellite spots of opposite polarity. I counted a total of 23 spots in this region. Many of those regions had decayed since the last time we looked at it, and you can see that in the sunspot number here as recorded by the Solar Influences Data Center in Belgium. The sunspot number has dropped to just over 60 and is likely to drop further in the next couple of days as those regions set over the west limb and if no new regions appear. We are certainly a lot lower than we were at the same time during the last Carrington rotation, which shows that overall the sun has quieted down at least a bit. I was just getting a new version of the GOES X-ray plot while I was preparing this video, and look what has happened here on the far right. We have an M flare going off followed by a fairly large C flare. So a lot of my protestations of how weak and quiet things are getting seems to be wrong. That's just the dangers of a solar forecaster. So we have an M flare, and it turns out it was from region 2929. In the meantime, over the last 3 days, we've had a few C flares, C2s and C1s, but nothing particularly spectacular. So let's take a look at some movies. First of all, the sunspot movie from the SDO HMI instrument, and this will show the decay of those sunspot regions and the fact that we've lost some over the west limb, which explains the reduction in our sunspot number. Next, we'll take a look at the SDO AIA instrument, the 94 angstrom movie channel, which has a temperature of 6 million degrees Kelvin, which will show us the flares quite nicely. And you can see right at the very end of this movie that M flare occurring in the upper right corner of the image. take a closer look at that M1.5 flare on the 18th by looking at a more detailed movie from the AIA 94 angstrom channel. I'm going to do 2 repeats. Now, the thing about this particular flare, it looks as though it's a launch of a coronal mass ejection. Now, it's too early yet to see whether we did have a coronal mass ejection, but it sure looks like it with this arcade of bright loops. So this is in a position that could actually cause a coronal mass ejection to strike the Earth. So that should be something that we should look out for in the next few days. We did have a fairly nice coronal mass ejection go off the west limb of the Sun about a day ago, and I'll show you a movie of that from the Soho-Lascaux C2 instrument. And in checking out that movie, I've discovered a second comet crashing into the Sun, but this is a lot brighter than the previous one, so enjoy. The solar wind is acting slightly strange. You can see that BZ, the vertical component of the interplanetary magnetic field, is drifting southwards, so there can be reconnections with the Earth's magnetosphere, which will cause geomagnetic storms, or can cause geomagnetic storms. But also, the density suddenly dropped earlier today, as did the temperature. Meanwhile, the speed of the solar wind has increased to over 600 kilometers per second. If you look at this recent image of the Sun, you can see there are 3 coronal holes, 2 in the north in the eastern hemisphere, and in a few days they're going to rotate over to a place where they are geomagnetically active. There's also this extension of the southern polar coronal hole towards the equator, which may also produce some high-speed wind at the Earth. So we again need to keep an eye on all of this. This has been a fairly active time for the magnetosphere. You can see that we've had 3 sets of geomagnetic storms and unsettled magnetosphere in between. What can we conclude from all of this? The sunspot number is beginning to decline compared to where it was last month, and so we may be in for a relatively quiet time for the next week or 2. Now, that was before I saw that M flare. We may have a little bit of excitement before that region goes over the west limb. Region 29 produced that M flare, which was quite unexpected, I must admit. We had a second sun-diving comet in 2 days, which is always sort of fun. So until next time, stay safe and goodbye.